listening to Now Steaming. This is a brand new podcast that aims to talk about the lived Tsinoy or Chinese-Filipino experience from the perspective of current Tsinoys, or current such a bad way of putting it. Tsinoys from this generation. There, I think that's a better way of putting it. Yeah, Tsinoys who basically grew up with both cultures, Chinese and Filipino, and how we're navigating this very complicated space in this very complicated time. My name is Stancy. I am a radio DJ, voice talent, and podcaster. And this is the first time that I'm going to be podcasting about these issues. And I'm not going to be on this journey alone. I'm actually going to be joined by two people who share these same backgrounds, the same motivations as I am. And we're going to try to get to know each other here in this pilot episode. So let me introduce my collaborators here for Now Steaming. They are the artists behind So Asian Comics, Kimberly Mas and Cedric Cheng. So let's get to know everybody, go around the room, and explore each other's backgrounds, myself included. But we'll start with the lady first. Let's start with Kim.
Wow, has to be me first.
Yes,
But
it
yeah.
has to be you first. So we're going to start with you. Kim, you are, of course, you also identify as Chinoy.
Mm-hmm.
And can you tell me about what school you went to, your family background, how you were raised in the context of being Chinoy?
Yeah. Okay. Hi guys, I'm Kim. So, I grew up in I would say, relatively sheltered, the typical setup. Now, my parents are very, um, my mom is more of like the traditional setup. Like she really loves the traditional setup. Let's say, for example, she would prefer Chinese medicine over Western medicine, things like that. But I grew up in Ika, so this is like the Green Hills setup. So you know that very well, Stan, because you're from Xavier.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Ika. The people there, they're very much open to like Western culture. So I really enjoyed my time in school. But on the flip side, my parents are so traditional. So every time I do something different, I do something new, they're not so comfortable with it. So yeah, there. And when I graduated from ICA, I went to CSB. So that was a problem for them because I went to number one, I went to an art school. Number two, there were no other Chinese people there. There were barely any Chinese people there. And yeah, this is another part of the podcast, but that's actually how I met Sed, because we were one of the few people, or one of the few Chinoys that were in CSB. So
And that's
we
not
we
even
stood out
getting
talaga.
into yung stereotype of CSB, di ba?
Yeah,
Like, we have to get it
exactly.
out there. There's a stereotype na CSB is
Mm-hmm.
tapunan ng mga hindi pumasa ng Lasal, which I've
Yes,
come to learn is such an unfair stereotype, like most
super.
stereotypes, right?
I'm
I've
like
thought
I
about that later.
yeah, I'm like, we went to the art school, the arts and design school in CSB, not the main one. So yeah, that's my background. What else am I missing?
What do you do for a living?
Oh yeah, me and Sed actually run a production studio, so it's called Artsmith, but we're not focused on that right now. I mean, it's there. Yeah, it earns money, but most of the time we're focused on our comics because that's the hot thing right now. Everybody loves it. Everybody can relate to it. And personally, it was just a passion project on our end, and it ended up being like a semi-business kind of thing. So, of course, if you have something like that, it's growing. You want to keep on like pushing everything, pushing content out, and yeah, that's what we're doing now.
So yeah, let's talk about the comics in a bit. But right now we got
Yeah.
to get to know Cedric better. So, Ced, what was your family background like growing up? Can you paint a picture for us?
Hey, might be a long one, so I'll try. All right. So one thing you should know about my family is that my father is the typical Binondo man. So, but my mom is the more modern one. So my dad is the one who wouldn't want to try any other cuisine. He just wants good old fashioned Chinese food. My mom's the one who gets
Same.
tired from it, so she wants to try Western cuisine. And in fact, fun fact, my mom doesn't know how to cook Chinese food, but she makes very good pasta. She makes very good steaks, that sort. And my educational background was that I studied in Makati Hope Christian School.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually kind of like a mixed crowd. Like in Ika and Xavier, you have the specific shall we say, maybe profile, I guess,
Mm. Yeah.
of the regular attendees of those schools.
Yeah, I would call that the uptown Chinoys. More
Yeah,
often than
Yeah.
not.
down Pinoy.
Yeah.
But for someone like me who comes from QC and then studies in a school in Makati,
Hmm.
so the crowd there was basically a mix of think of Makati, Dasma, Forbes, Chinoys,
Okay.
and then you throw in the South Chinoys as well, like Paranaque
What's a
Chinoys.
South Chinoy? Can you get into that a bit?
Yeah.
Okay,
How are,
that's
how
Please
are they different
explain.
from the Binondo Chinoy or like the Green Hills Chinoy? Kasi the Binondo Chinoy, you described them na eh, di ba? Yung downtown, like the type na um,
very pragmatic
very
people.
pragmatic,
Mm.
Yeah.
family business, more
Yes.
often than not hardware, right?
Yep.
That's your Binondo Chinese. And then conversely naman, the Green Hills Chinese or Chinoy is someone who went to Ika Savior, tambayan niya yung promenade, they're really into bougie stuff.
Yes.
More often than not, they're able to pronounce brands like Marite Francois Gervaux, that type of shit. So what's a South Chinese or what's a South Chinoy?
Okay. Basically, South Chinoy is like okay, I don't want to generalize, but from my experience growing up, interacting with these people, they're more or less pragmatic, like the Binondo Chinoys, but at the same time, they're more, shall we say, more open-minded. So they pick up on new things like or different like cultural shifts, right? Let's say when it comes to no offense, but let's say LGBT issues. While most of the Chinoys whom I've met are very conservative towards that, the South Chinoys they're more open-minded, shall we say?
Mas progressive yung views
Yes, mas
nila about it.
progressive sila. Yeah.
Okay.
So imagine mo, my childhood interaction in the Chinoy community was those types of people plus the Makati Forbes crowd. So I think I would say it's pretty much the same with the Green Hills Chinoy.
Yeah,
They're
I
also
was about to
uptown
say
as
that.
well. Yeah. So here I am, this QC boy who's in between these two types of Chinoy groups. I think.
See, I used to describe yung variance in the Chinoy demographic as a spectrum. Like,
Spectrum. There we go.
I used to think na it was just the uptown, the downtown, and then there was a midtown. But now that you've introduced the whole element of the South, I have no idea where to put them in. So,
Same.
napaka close-minded in retrospect nung idea ko na yon. So we'll put that aside for now. Said, tell me about your career. What type of work are you into?
All right. So I'm actually in the same industry as Kim. But one thing you should know my background is that I chose to be in CSB. Although I would tell people that yes, I passed LaSalle, but I chose to be in CSB because of their multimedia arts course. So it's just funny na every time my friends back in Makati Hope would tell their parents, na, oh, Cedric took up CSB Multimedia Arts. But they will always make it a point to barge in, but he passed LaSalle. So,
Right.
so it's, yeah, right? So
So that's your baggage.
that's my baggage. So anyways, coming into CSB Multimedia Arts, there was only like a few of us Chinoys in our course. I think for sure less than 10 people.
Less than 10, definitely.
Less than 10 people.
Less than 10.
And then Kim was in another course actually. She was in animation. Yeah, and I've only met Kim during our second year in college in one class, which was photography. So, anyways, yeah. So fast forward when I graduated. Oh man, corporate life was kind of hard because being the only Chinoy creatives in the workforce during that time, my goodness, you get all sorts of questions. Um, if China would invade the Philippines, are you gonna side with them or the Filipinos? And I have no idea how they got this info, but for some reason they found out where I live. So it's a village in Ortigas. You figure that out, what that is. So, and then they started making all these assumptions that is my house the kind of house that has a long gate, a big gate with a long driveway before the actual house. Like, no, no, my house isn't anything like that. So, oh my gosh, lots of times that I felt alone during those times up until I saved up enough to start our own studio. And then that was when me and Kim joined forces. Like, this was like sometime later.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sige. Since you guys have been pretty open, pretty candid about your backgrounds, let me share a bit of my story. So, as Kim mentioned, I'm Xaverian. I believe I'm two batches above Kim. So, halos we interacted in pretty much the same circles growing up.
Yeah.
I went to UP for college and I took up broadcast communication, which is a very non-Chinoy stereotypical course.
Yeah.
Diba? Mascom eh. No, but for Chinoys, normally you don't think about sending your kid to Mascom. So immediately I got questions like, ano gusto mong gawin? You want to be like Nolly De Castro? You want to be a newscaster? You want to be an anchor? You know, that type of stuff. Um, and then when I graduated, I was already in radio. So I started that in college. Nag-DJ na ako nun. I'm still in radio. 10, 11 years later, my work is really more on the creative side, content creation, basically from podcasting to radio to being a voice actor. Like I'm the imaging voice of ETC, which is the general entertainment channel of Solar, and all the other stuff that I do. It's really very creative and not very businessy. You know, I don't do a whole lot of bookkeeping. I don't do a whole lot of like even sales and marketing.
Yeah.
Iba yung perspective ko on these things. And there was a time in my early career when my mom was actually trying to push me in the direction of corporate. So, Cedric, I can identify with that. Yung parang feeling alone, feeling lost. We'll get into this in a different episode. How
Yeah.
yung nga, being Chinoy, you're kind of put in a little box, diba? But I'm still here. I'm still doing creative stuff, and thankfully, I've gotten to a point where I'm already being supported by those around me, and I'm also making enough money to really justify na I bet on myself, and it was the correct decision. And anybody who has a problem with that can go suck it. So,
Yeah. You know what, Stan? I gotta add to that, no, just to give our listeners like a little bit of a sneak peek in our like mga future episodes, no. You mentioned that they were trying to push you into corporate. For me naman, as a woman in the creative industry, you know, syempre, there's not a lot of Chinoys there. And syempre, at a certain age, they want you to get married, stuff like that, right? And they're like, you're not meeting anyone in your workspace, so why not try banking? Like,
yes,
try bank.
so fun.
Yeah,
Like this is
right.
totally the Tinder of
Exactly.
corporate.
Exactly. Just a sneak peek, guys. Na, you know, banking, and I'm like, why banking? Like, why BDO? I mean, and then BDO specifically, and I was like, oh, okay, what am I gonna do there? I didn't take up accounting. I didn't take up bookkeeping. And I suck at math. So why would I want to do banking? And they're like, oh, you know, you can get to meet people there, more people there, and they want to throw me into like some downtown branch or whatever. And I'm like, nope, that's not happening.
So, as we're digging into yung mga backgrounds natin, let's talk about language a bit kasi that's part of yung upbringing natin, di ba, as Chinoys. So, I want to ask, what is your level of mastery of Hokkien and Mandarin? Kasi ito yung two na pinaka-common, di ba, in our community.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna start and I will tell you that my Mandarin is so-so, and I say that generously. I can probably survive with basic directions and basic questions in a Chinese-speaking country for like a week if I had to travel there. Or if I had to host an event, I could probably survive with the script, right? In terms of Hokkien, I can understand it. If someone speaks to me in Hokkien, I can pick up context clues, but more often than not, I'll have a very quizzical look on my face. Hindi ko siya masasagot agad because hindi siya natural sa akin, unlike English or Tagalog. So that's me. How about you, Sed?
Whew. My Mandarin, I would say that it's almost non-existent. I mean, I could understand a few words. I know how to order things in a restaurant, but other than that, my Mandarin is just. But when it comes to Hokkien, well, things have improved from when I met Kim before. But before that, my Hokkien was just really bad. But I can understand in terms of context clues, because of course I hear my mom and dad talk all the time.
Yeah.
So you're just familiar with phrases and words.
Right,
But
right.
when it comes to replying back, sometimes even though I know how to respond to it, but at the same time I choose not to because I'm conscious about my intonations,
Mm.
right? So that's why I choose not to reply back in Hokkien. And at the same time, with my very Asian face, right?
Hmm.
I can't speak proper Hokkien. And segue, that has also been like a source of, like, I think a conflict when I was in a fair representing So Asian comics. Like, there was this boomer Chinoy dad
Oh man.
who mentioned that I have no right, I have no business on being the co-author and co-illustrator to So Asian comics because I couldn't understand what he was saying in Hokkien.
Okay, let's dig into
Diba?
that a bit. Kasi I think I can speak for the three of us when we say
Yeah.
na there is a little bit of kinship when you find someone who speaks that language, 'di ba? Like growing up, ako na alala ko whenever I'd encounter fellow Chinoys, and then you ask the question, eh, ko na ng uwe ba? Right? Do you know how to speak Hokkien? Parang their eyes light up kapag marunong ka, kapag
Yeah.
naiintindihan mo, 'di ba? Like all of a sudden bumabait sila, mas warm sila, 'di ba? Pero pag hindi ka marunong, hindi ka makasagot,
Uh-huh. Hostile.
magkakaroon ng distance, kind of like what you experienced, said. So I'm gonna throw it to you, Kim. How well versed are you in terms of these languages?
Oh, sige, maybe I'll start with Mandarin because like you, Stan, I can go to China, I can probably get around like the basic stuff, I know it, but if once you speak to me in Mandarin, like really deep Mandarin, I can't understand anymore. But when I was younger, I was actually trained. Like my mom really wanted me to be fluent in
Mm-hmm.
Mandarin, like speaking and writing, because she says it's gonna be an advantage for me once like I grow up. Like China is gonna be this powerhouse, whatever. So,
I mean, she
I mean, I
wasn't
did.
wrong.
Yeah, she wasn't wrong, but yeah, I get her point now. Like you can actually snag some gigs just by having like knowing how to speak Mandarin, right?
Yeah.
But for now, I would go to like Hokkien. No, I grew up like I mean, let's say I would be talking to my parents in Tagalog or English, and they wouldn't like it. They're gonna tell me, "Ah, go boy hao, tiadi de kong siya." So like I don't know, like I don't understand what you're saying. If you're gonna speak to me in Tagalog, if you're gonna speak to me in English, I'm not gonna reply. So you're gonna be forced to speak in Hokkien, and
Okay.
that's yeah. I grew up like that. I mean,
He's well
my
trained.
super well trained. I mean, I can say I was. This is my I would say this is my mindset, like from the beginning. Like I was trained to be like this quote unquote perfect Chinese housewife.
Right.
I think that was the proper like how should I say this, like term for it, like proper Chinese housewife. My mom really trained me for that. So every time like I meet this Chinese parent, they're gonna be super impressed with me. They're like, oh, you're so fluent in Hokkien, like you're so good. And they're gonna be super nice to you, like opposite to what said mentioned earlier.
Kasi
Like
nga
they're
you
gonna be
check all
super
the
nice.
boxes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a girl. I mean, I'm okay naman. I don't look ugly, diba? So, and I
He
can
was
speak
part of a
Hokkien.
pageant. He was
Yeah,
part of a
yun
pageant.
nga, I can speak Hokkien properly and like I'm very fluent. So, yeah, Chinese. What's that term said you mentioned before? Chinese house
Yeah,
what?
you're the ideal
Ideal Chinese
Chinese
housewife, parang
housewife.
ganon.
This is
Yeah.
why Kim has a lot of unanswered message requests and friend requests. Like you'll
What a
just see
flex.
them come out.
Nah.
You'll see these messages pop out of nowhere. And
Mm.
one time, this guy, this
I think I
he looks
posted that
he
on
looks
Facebook.
like in his 30s or 40s, a
Yeah.
single Chinoy man.
Don't name
He just
drop.
he just he just sends his quote unquote resume to Kim for Kaishao.
I mean, I
Like
didn't even ask for it. Okay, I didn't
like
ask for it.
this is what I do, this is where I live, this is where I graduated.
This
Like
is my family
this is my
business,
family
etc.,
business.
etc.
Kulang na lang na he puts in his income statement and we're good.
That shit is way more common than you think in our
Really?
community. Yeah, yeah,
Oh.
it's actually pretty common and it's so weird. This is not the first time na may nagkwento sa akin na yung way nila of pagpapakilala or para
It's a
plus
checklist.
points. Yeah, it's a checklist. Parang CV for dating basically, which is really
Oh my
ridiculous,
God.
but kind of paints a picture of how ridiculous yung pag-condition sa atin as Chinoys, right? Now, on that note, let's go to So Asian Comics. Let's talk about that. Kasi yun yung project nyo talaga. You've been doing this for a few years now. And before we get into Sed's kwento about the older Chinoy who criticized you for the comics, let's talk about the comics mismo. How did this come about? And why did you decide to pour your creativity into this project?
Yeah, I think I can go first here.
Mhm.
Like this podcast, no, I mean, we're so passionate about it. These are topics that we wanted to put out there. I feel like as Chinoys, no, there's this certain limit to what you're gonna put out. Like you can't say certain things. I don't know if you guys experience that. Like you can't say certain things when you're with your friends, or let's say if it's a family matter, it's gonna be a family matter. I think it's a given when you're in a Chinoy family. Now you're not supposed to speak about certain things, right? And for us, we wanted like fellow Chinoys to be able to relate to like what we're experiencing. We want them to have like a safe platform to like shall I say this? It's comics, right? So it's supposed to be funny. Everyone can say what they want there. It's supposed to be satire in a way.
It's
So,
non-threatening.
oh yeah, non-threatening, hindi siya kumbaga parang once you put it out, it's just funny. Parang ganun. People will take it with a grain of salt because it's comics there. And we started with our first comic, which was Bohoe Paba. Do you have a significant other?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that. No, I think this was Sed's idea, so maybe he can add on to that. No, Sed, what do you think? Like you
Oh,
started the whole idea, you posted it on Facebook. I mean, yeah.
basically, this is going back to my childhood actually because I always wanted to be a comic artist as a kid. So that was why I contributed in our journalism club's newspaper, where I'm their dedicated comic artist. And and as a kid as well, like well, I can't remember if it was TGI Fridays or Chili's, where the the placemat is actually paper, and then they give you crayons to draw on it.
Parang TGI
Burgu.
Fridays or Burgu. Yeah.
Burgu.
Ah, yeah, Burgu, yeah.
Siyempre, alam mo
Yeah.
yan, meron ka na sa promenade dati.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
So, anyways, during as a kid, I used to make fun of my dad, so I would actually draw him on the restaurant placemats. So at that point, I've gotten used to how to draw a cartoon version of my dad. So fast forward, 2017.
Mhm.
I can't remember. I think during this time, like me and Kim have this inside joke, na bohowe pa ba and all that, because I came from a CCF church retreat, and me, I'm just really there for the Lord, all right. But it was advertised as a singles retreat. I just thought, okay, it's just a retreat for people who aren't married, but it was much later that I found out that it's actually a retreat for kaishao, for people to meet their potential spouses. But
Na-authorized ko by the Lord.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just when I went home from that retreat, my parents are like, "Buhoy pa ba? Like, have you met anyone there?" And I'm like, "What?" So, anyways, when I told Kim that became a running joke. So
Yeah.
fast forward 2017, I decided to draw my dad saying that, and then I showed it to Kim. Kim showed it to her mom, and then they both laughed. And then Kim's like, you should post this, and we're like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Then that went on to eventually become our first ever comic, the Boho.
I actually can't remember when we decided to make a page. It was just
No, it
okay.
was
At first,
spontaneous. It was
no,
on
no,
the
no.
same day.
We were actually planning to post it on our personal pages. I mean,
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
wasn't a thing, diba? Na parang, okay, why are we gonna do comics? Okay, just post it on our personal page. And then after a while, I just decided, hey, just make a page and let's just post it there and see what happens. And then We shared it, like obviously, like we had no followers that time, so Said shared it on his personal page, I shared it on my personal page, and overnight it blew up. I mean, like our friends could relate, so they shared the entire thing, and that's when it started. We got a few people messaging us, oh hey, you have like a very interesting page, can you like make more of those or something similar? So yeah, that's when it started. We really brainstormed a lot of ideas. Like we had a lot of ideas that time, so
Just look at our parents for ideas.
yeah. So we had to pace ourselves as well. Like, I mean, if as a content creator, you know this very well, you can't just churn out content all the time, like every day. So maybe we just pace ourselves. So every other week we would post. So every Friday, 11:30, that's our schedule. If not Saturday, 11:30. So yeah, that's how it started.
Bakit so Asian comics yung name? Is it yung parang pa-joke na that's so Asian. Yun ba yun?
Yeah, it just that. Like, I mean, we didn't want to complicate things any further. At first part, we wanted it to be parang
So
so
Chinese.
no, Chinoy comics or something along the lines of that. But we said, parang it doesn't sound right. It's too specific. I feel like our comics medyo other
It's
Chinese people or
encompassing of different Asian.
yeah, any race, any Asian, kahit Asian American, they can sort of relate to our situation. So we just we just gave it a very general name, like so Asian comics. That's it, and it clicked naman. So everybody, it's too late to change it now. I mean, people know us
Oh,
for
may
as
branding
so
na kayo eh.
may branding na, so we can't change it. We gotta stick to it, and we're known for it. So yeah, happy about that.
So when I found out about your story, how you used So Asian Comics as a platform to talk about these things or to at least poke fun at these things that we
Yes.
grew up with, grew up around, yung mga low-key frustrations natin about our lives. I related to that, and we started talking weeks before we recorded this episode,
Yeah,
this pilot episode, because ako naman personally, I've been wanting to have a platform then where I can talk about these things, these issues. You're right, Kim, kanina nung sinabi mo na there are a lot of things na hindi natin mapag-usapan, not just around our families but even our among our friends kasi
yeah.
considered taboo siya, 'di ba,
Mhm.
for the Chinese-Filipino community. And I kind of want to break that down because a lot of these things that have been considered taboo, dapat siyang pag-usapan. Even something as simple as
Exactly.
sex education, for example. Like one of
Mhm.
the reasons why
Mhm.
overpopulation and STIs are still a problem is because we don't talk about sex enough, right? So even something as basic as that, hindi siya napapag-usapan. So what
Mhm.
more yung mga deeper issues that our community goes through? So I think that segues well into why we decided to talk about this, why this podcast exists. Let's talk about the name first. We're calling this now steaming. And if you saw yung concept art for the podcast, you'll probably notice like images of dumplings and stuff. And I think it's pretty obvious that growing up Chinoy means you grew up around dumplings, and dumplings taste great. But more digging deeper into that, it's all about us having these conversations and hot takes. Kaya siya steaming, di ba?
Yeah.
We want to try to bring out these conversations, and some of these will be hot takes, but that's the idea. The idea is to kind of shock the system, so to speak, and get you to talk about it. So I want to bring it back to you guys, Kim and Said. Why are you on board with putting yourselves out there? Kasi ako sanay na ako with like getting my ideas on my podcasts or on the radio, right? But why are you so into this idea of bringing these conversations out there?
I feel like it'll help a lot of people, like a lot of Chinoys, because they're still very close. I would say close-minded. They don't like talking about certain issues. Like they're just gonna leave it be. Like for example, there's this pressing issue about something. They're not gonna talk about it. They're just gonna bury it under the ground. And okay, yeah, let's just keep it that way. Like I mean, status quo, right? They want it like that. Whatever they're used to, let's say you're used to a certain setup, they're just going to keep it that way. They don't want to explore. They don't want to shall I say innovate. Like some Chinoys are like that. They don't want to innovate. They just want to what
Copy.
they know, that yeah, copy or stick to what they know. That's it. And I guess this podcast is a good way to like talk about those issues. Let's say people who want to talk about it, they can relate to our podcast sessions. I mean, yeah, I guess that's why I'm on board. And when you talked to me about it, I was like, hey, we actually had this idea of a podcast before. We just didn't know how to execute it. We didn't know where to start. I mean, we're not in the broadcasting industry. I mean, I've had a taste of it, but I wouldn't say I'm an expert. So that's why I'm really glad that you approached us, because this is gonna be like really fun for us, whether or not it takes off or not. Hopefully it takes off, but I really want this to be, I guess, like a safe space for like Chinoys to, um, like they can listen to us, or maybe let's say they're afraid to speak up, they can just listen to our sessions and they can say, okay, um, I have other people who can relate to me as well. So yeah, that's why I'm on board.
How about you, said?
Well, two reasons. First one is a personal reason because I myself, well, I would consider myself an outsider of your typical Chinoy communities because I don't know, there's just a lot of things that they believe in, they do that I don't, and things that I do that they don't uh, necessarily like or believe in. So lots of stereotypes about, let's say, for example, the Chinoy male expectations. Just because I'm an artist, people think I'm gay. Just because I'm expressive, like I'm not this stern and reserved person, they think I'm gay. All the more, all the more when I enjoy wearing my blazers or my suits, right? They think I'm gay. So lots of these expectations that they project on me. So and also it's quite frustrating, really. And at the same time, I've also met a lot of creative Chinoys, or just Chinoys who don't. How do I say this? They're too foreign for their Pinoy friends, but at the same, they're too Chinese for their Pinoy friends, but they're also too foreign for the Chinoy community. So
Ooh,
I've
I
met a
love
lot
that.
of people who are like this, and they just feel like at a loss on where they belong. So it's nice to put up this kind of podcast just to let people know that yes, there are also a lot of people like you, and actually a lot of these people who I've met, they're from the same generation as us, but also I've met some Gen Zs as well who are like this. Well, Kim, if you remember, one of your
Jazz,
yeah
my students before.
yeah
Yeah, I know. I've seen her posts.
yeah. So and then she messaged me the other day about this topic, and I told her like,
Oh,
hey,
oh, interesting.
um,
You told her about the podcast?
yeah. So I was like,
Okay,
hey,
cool.
wait for this podcast. It's gonna release. It's gonna talk about these things. So here we are.
Yeah, I like what you said. Na there's that feeling that you're too Chinese to be Filipino, but you're also too
Mm-mm.
Filipino to be Chinese. And I think that middle ground is something a lot of us have wrestled with over the years. And it's not just new millennial generation. I think na even before us, the generation of yung Gen X na Chinoys or the boomer generation, our parents, I think they also wrestled with that, di ba? As long as hindi ka first generation immigrant, you kind of wrestle with that given that you grew up here or you were born here, diba? For people like us, we were born here and raised here already. And one of you mentioned this kanina, the question, which has repeatedly come up. If the Philippines and China were to get into a conflict, which side would you take? Right?
Oh,
To me, that's such a ridiculous question, and
it
it's a
is.
question that is still somehow on people's minds. Lalo na there are issues between the two countries, diba? Right now, like this is one of the taboos or one of the Voldemort topics that people don't want to talk about. But the reality is, it's an issue. So I'm gonna acknowledge it and say na the Philippines and China are at odds, and it kind of puts us Chinoys in a very complicated spot. Kim, I
Mm-hmm.
remember in one of our group chats, sinabi mo na you were actually asked this on air in an interview.
Yeah,
And how did you
yeah.
feel upon being asked this, and how did you respond?
I was like, holy cow, they're asking me this question again. I mean, okay, ganito ah. That question has been asked several, like for me, like when I was while I was working before. like I worked two jobs before I resigned. So it's an animation studio. The other one's an advertising agency. So obviously there were no other Chinoys there or no other Chinese people there. So the usual question is, I mean that time the China Philippines issue was already hot. So people would always ask me like, "Oy, sige mo, what do you think about the ano pag nag-invade yung China? Who are you gonna side with, like the Philippines or China?" And I'm like, why are you asking me that? I mean, it's so wrong for me. Like, parang I'm Chinese. Yes, I'm Chinese, but I'm also Filipino. Like, it's so hard to make them grasp that idea na parang okay, you were born and raised here your entire life. So parang why on earth are you gonna side with China? Parang it makes no sense. Parang you're Filipino first. Parang ganon.
And
But
not just
you're just
that.
from
Yeah,
a
go, go, go.
Chinese, like parang you're just may Chinese descent ka lang. That's it.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
Chinese
the perfect
background
way to
lang.
put it. You're a Filipino of Chinese descent. Ako personally, I identify as Chinese Filipino. Like that's the wording I use, not
Mhm.
Filipino Chinese. It's
Yeah.
Chinese Filipino kasi and I'm gonna get technical here in terms of
Mhm.
grammar. Chinese is the antecedent, it's the adjective, and
Mhm.
Filipino is the noun. So I am a
Mhm.
Chinese Filipino. I am Filipino, born and raised. I just happen to be of Chinese descent. Said, I don't know how you feel about this.
No, no, that's true. My goodness. And lots of times I have to tell people that, Chinoys here, a lot of us Chinoys don't generally share the same sentiment with with the CCP
CP or China in general.
and in general, my goodness. And the citizens mismo in China have different nuances in lifestyle and in thinking compared to the Chinoys here. So we're just two completely like different groups, but we just happen to come from the same. We just happen to descend from the same
Yeah.
ancestry. That's that.
Yeah. If you go to China, you're too foreign for them. Like you're too foreign for them to be like, oh, you're Chinese. You're Chinese pala. Like they're gonna say things like that. Oh, you're Chinese, but you're too foreign for us. But when you're
Right.
here in the Philippines, they're gonna be like, oh, you're so Chinese. Pero Filipino ako. Parang that's what I say. Filipino ako. I grew up here. Marunong ka mag-Tagalog, di ba?
And I think hindi lang Chinoys yung nagsa-struggle with that. Yung parang yung Chinese descent mo kind of making you an outsider to either culture. If you guys have read books like The Joy Luck Club or Crazy Rich Asians, they introduce the concept of yung banana as a derogatory term towards Chinese or yung mga half Chinese or of Chinese descent na hindi na masyado in touch with their pagiging Chinese. Kasi diba yung banana is yellow on the outside but it's white on the inside.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I laughed so hard when I heard that line. Like, yeah, accurate.
Right.
Super accurate.
So I don't want to paint a picture naman na we're all bananas or whatever, 'di ba? Kasi even among the Chinoys, iba-iba tayo na kunwari pagiging in touch with our Chinese side, right? So yeah, I think I don't want to paint a picture na we're all bananas. I think that's a very unfair misrepresentation naman of all of us, 'di ba? Pero the reason why the podcast ultimately exists is we want to have this platform where it can be a safe space where we can talk
Yeah.
about these things, where we can try to process yung mga feelings natin having grown up Chinoy kasi there's a lot of good. There's also a little bit of bad, as with any
Mhm.
other culture. And we just happen to be a very unique culture. Now, we don't talk about these things. So it's nice to get it out there and get to talking about it. And that's why Now Steaming exists. Is there anything else pa ba that we need to bring up? I think that's basically it, right?
Yeah, that's basically it. I think we gave everyone like a teaser of what we're gonna talk about. I mean, in our future episodes. So you guys have to watch out for that. Stay tuned
Yeah.
to your next episodes because it's gonna be really interesting. So if you wanna tune in, just go on and like our social media pages. That's Now Steaming. We're on Facebook. We're on Spotify and yeah, perhaps Instagram na rin. So yeah,
And
watch out for our future episodes.
maybe we should give them like just a small teaser of what we're going to talk about in our next.
Sure. Perfect. So we actually have a little Google Doc. This is us pulling the curtain back a bit, and some of the things we want to explore as we go along are the concept of being a Chinoy in the first place. Like, who is a Chinoy? What is a Chinoy? Diba? How do you who gets to define that you are Chinoy or that you are not a Chinoy?
Mm-hmm.
The Great Wall, I think a lot of people are going to be watching out for that one. The idea of kaishao, which is something that all of us grew up around. LGBTQ plus issues is something we hope to get to unpack as well kasi we're a very conservative community. And
Exactly.
gender norms, gender roles.
Ooh.
Kasi the Chinoy community is very patriarchal, low-key misogynistic, and we hope to get that out there. So there, some of the things that you can expect from Now Steaming. So as Kim said, you can follow us on social media individually if you want to reach out and have your own little safe conversations with us. You can hit us up. For me, it is @_Stancy on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook, it is Stancy Online. What about you, Said?
Oh, you can add me on Facebook if you want. The Cedric C. Cheng, and then there's a profile picture of a guy with a suit. That's me.
How about you,
Ooh,
Kim?
perfect. For me, you can reach out like Facebook, Instagram. Yeah, just those two. It's at Kimberly Mass. I also have a page because I do hosting sometimes. So you can find me on Facebook. That's at Kimberly Mass, or on Instagram, also at Kimberly Mass if you want to reach out to me. And of course, our Now Steaming social media pages, as like what Stan mentioned earlier. You can reach out there.
All right. That's going to put an end to the pilot episode of Now Steaming. It's a brand new podcast that we're all working on. So until we come up with a really clever sign off, we're just going to end the podcast here. And we hope that we tickled you enough to get you excited for what we have to talk about. Now Steaming out.